we just not can wait to see what the future technology can coming next. But we are here today to meet up with the two wait to see what the future technology can coming sharing next. Economy industry. But we are here today how they to meet up with the two wait to see what the future technology can coming sharing economy industry. But we are here today how they to meet up with the two wait to see what the future technology can coming sharing economy industry. But we are here today which focus with the two wait to see what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the interaction among guests. So wait to see let's hear what the importance of social common space in promoting to the
and we're handling all the payments systems as well. And so far, it's working out. It's working out for Christina. We've gotten some traction. We've gotten some results. And right now, we're ranked as the #1 accommodation business in Hochiminh City. Probably in Vietnam, if you count all the statistics, but they don't rank it across the country. But I want to talk about this person and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So Phương is a host. She started with us during her second year in college. And she asked me if she could stop going to school so she can work full-time. She was part-time at the time. So that she can work full-time. And I asked why. She said, well, because I want to help support my parents. So I thought about it a lot. And I told Phương that how about we offer you a full-time position, but you promise that you stay in school. You can still support your family just as if you were working full-time, but I want you to finish your college degree. And she accepted it. Today, Phương is with us. She's sitting over there. She has become a host entrepreneur, which is in our business of hosting. Is the peak level of a host. To manage our main location, the one that we first started out with at Nguyen Chai, Christina Saigon, the mothership. So that's Phung's story. That's the impact that Airbnb has helped me, has empowered me to empower other people. Today, Phung's story is not the only one. We have 130 people full-time and another 70 people participating on a part-time basis, freelance. And those are the people that are directly getting impacted by what Christina is doing. But that's before talking about all the local communities that we're also working with. in 3 years, and this is kind of crazy, but we're hoping to turn what we have been doing into the #1 hub for entrepreneurs, for anybody who wants to do something, to do things right, to come and participate, to be empowered, to create the impact that they so desire for their country, for their community. So that's what we're working towards. That's hopefully, if things go well, we'll get there. But it all goes back to this. This is the first listing. And the room looks exactly like that when we first started, 3 years ago. This is the first listing on Airbnb that we did that helped us achieve what we've come to achieve today. My classmate, my friend, and now he's here in Vietnam as my business partner, Nathan Blecharczyk.
Thanks for that kind introduction, too. And if you missed the reference, we actually went to high school together back in Boston, back in the 90s. So we go way back, and it's just a coincidence now that we're here today. You as an Airbnb superhost, having accomplished so much, and it's been fun to visit you and see the growth and actually learn a lot in the process by what you're doing.
So, I've been trying to convince Nate to come out to Vietnam for quite a long time, and given his schedule, you can imagine it's very hard for him to just say, yeah, I'll come out and hang out with you. But he made it. He came out, and I think it's because he's really buying into the work that we're doing. I keep on telling him how much Airbnb has created an impact on the local communities in Vietnam. And you have to go out here to see it. But before we go deeply into this in terms of how it's impacting the local communities, perhaps Nate can just share with us about how it all got started. Because that picture right there, I don't know if Nate remembers, but that was us sailing out this was summer of 2008. We were sailing in Maine, Portland, Maine. And I was talking about some crazy startup idea in finance, and Nate was like, I'm working on a project. Well, there you go. So why don't you share with us in terms of how you got it started?
So there's two parts to how things got started. I'll start with the more general beginning, which is me as an engineer. So I'm an engineer by background. There's three of us that started the company, but of the three, I was the engineer. And my start with computers actually goes back to my high school years. I picked up computer programming as a hobby at the age of 12. I was posting stuff on the internet, and saying, if you like what you see, you can pay me $5 for it. Nobody ever sent me $5, but at the age of 14, somebody called me and said, I saw what you posted. I want you to create something similar for me, and I'll pay you $1,000. I was like, whoa. So I told my dad, somebody from the internet wants to pay me $1,000. And he said, son, nobody from the internet is going to pay you $1,000. He just laughed at me. But I said, whatever, I'm passionate about this. I'm going to do this anyways. It'll be fun. And I did that. And actually, I did get paid. And I got introduced to other people and started networking. And actually, this began a business that I ran throughout high school. And over the course of which I made a good deal of money, almost $1 million in high school, doing this over 4.5 years. But more important than the money was the sense of confidence I got in myself. First, that I could teach myself all the necessary skills. And second, that I could create things that other people valued. And it was from that experience that I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life. So now I'll just fast forward, I guess 10 years go by or so. And it's now it's late 2007, early 2008. So basically, there's three of us, myself, my two co-founders. We were roommates living in San Francisco in the summer of 2007. And suddenly the landlord realized that the original leaseholders were no longer living there, and that gave him an excuse to raise the rent 25%. And I said, well, that's too expensive. I'm going to move out now. But the other two guys wanted to stay in the apartment, but they had just quit their jobs to become entrepreneurs, also known as unemployed. Yeah, you know how it is. I hear the laughter. So they didn't have any money either. But they're both designers, and they saw that a design conference was coming to San Francisco. And they saw that all the hotels were sold out. So they got an idea. Why not rent that vacant bedroom that I had vacated to designers who might need a place to stay? And so they made a simple blog post and described the space, and actually attracted 3 people to stay there who paid for it. So they were able to pay rent that month. But then they all went to the conference together and had a really good time. And Joe and Brian showed them around San Francisco. So, you know, it was a win-win situation. It was really, though, them solving their own problem just for one weekend. It wasn't supposed to be a big business. There was no ambition larger than that. However, a few months went by, and then the 3 of us, we knew we wanted to work with each other, because living together, we had seen the work ethic we each had. We each had projects going on the weekends after work, and we saw that we had complementary skills, and we thought, you know, we could help each other do something great. We just didn't know what it was until we realized that, you know, we had been sitting on it for months, not even knowing it. And this is what we set out to do in early 2008, basically make it just as easy to book someone's home as it is a hotel. And so we started in 2008. All of 2008 was super tough, but soon thereafter it started to take off and become what it is today, 9 years later. Thank you.
Well, just to get the audience an idea of how this is going to work, I will ask Nate a few more questions, but if anyone who has a question, do raise your hand, and we'll hand over a mic, and you can ask Nate directly what you have in your mind.
Ask me anything, yeah, seriously.
But before, no hands yet, I'm just going to go and get some updates from Nate, maybe. Can you just kind of share with the audience, so from that point of how Airbnb got started until now, it has grown tremendously, and just being a host, an Airbnb host in Vietnam, we've seen it skyrocketed as well. So can you kind of share a little bit, whatever you can share, in terms of the short term, the near term of where Airbnb is going, how Airbnb is dealing with some of the changes that are happening with more, even, for example, the trip experiences that are coming in. What are the changes that are happening at Airbnb?
There's 3 really major areas of focus for us. The first has been geographic expansion, and that's been happening really over the last 7 years. You know, basically bringing Airbnb around the world, but it's still an area of focus today. So, you know, as a company, we're very focused on growing in China. We're also particularly focused on growing in Southeast Asia. That's part of why I'm here today. I'm going to Singapore tonight. I'll be in Thailand later this week. But, you know, tourism is exploding in Southeast Asia. There isn't the same kind of infrastructure built up here. And so I think it's a great opportunity to kind of get in on the ground floor and help the local people participate in this tourism growth using the Airbnb platform. So there's still a lot of growing to do just geographically. Beyond that, though, we've also been focused on going deeper into different segments of the market, consumer segments. So, you know, there's a focus on family travelers. There's a focus on business travelers. We bought a company earlier this year that's focused on luxury travelers. So, you know, when you think Airbnb, you might not think luxury, you might not think business. But actually, with a few tweaks, the model could be quite relevant. And so there's a lot of things we're doing to cater to those audiences, and it's some of our fastest growing audiences. The final bucket, which is like the biggest change, I would say, is moving beyond just the home to being a platform for the entire trip. So this is a huge expansion of our kind of focus and mission, which is What are all the different ways we can create belonging on someone's trip? You know, connecting them more authentically to their surroundings, to the people, enabling these really rich experiences. And the first thing we've done in this direction is what we call Airbnb experiences. Basically, creating a whole new class of hosts who, instead of sharing their home, are sharing something they're passionate about. And they make that available to travelers. And it's a way not just to, you know, develop a common interest or explore a common interest, but, you know, to meet other guests from around the world and meet a local person and form relationships. And so this is something that we just launched at the end of last year. We now have it in Hochiminh City, so it's here. It's early days, so, you know, feel free to check it out, get in on the ground floor. We have it probably in a handful of other cities across Asia, and it's doing quite well. But that's just the beginning. We want to be a platform for the entire trip, and we'll have other big announcements to come in the future.
Awesome. We're looking forward to it. Okay. We have someone with a question. Should we pass this mic? Yeah, so can you
hear me now? Okay,
yeah,
great.
I can hear you.
Once again, thank you again for coming here today. I have one question regarding Craigslist. So the first few stages of Airbnb, you guys listed your property on Craigslist, if I'm not wrong. So I'm having a problem with myself seeing that how does a move like that affecting a traffic and inventory and brand awareness toward Airbnb? Because for the people who are looking to rent property, you don't know whether you see this property listed on Craigslist or on Airbnb. And the people who list the property on Airbnb, they don't know whether the effectiveness of Airbnb is working or not. So I would like to know more about this move that you made in the past. Thank you.
So Airbnb is a marketplace, a two-sided marketplace. So you need customers who are travelers, and you need suppliers who are hosts. And the challenge of a two-sided marketplace is it works really well at scale. It makes for a great, very defensible business. But when you're just starting out, it's really hard because if you have suppliers, you can't get suppliers without customers, and you can't get customers without suppliers. And so it's a chicken or the egg kind of conundrum. And so in that situation, you have to figure out how to bootstrap both sides of the market. So step one was to attract supply. You can't, by definition, you can't have a customer unless you have something to give to them. So by definition, you started with getting supply. And the good news is that we could attract people to list their homes, and even if they didn't get a booking on the first day, it was okay. You know, if they got a booking 2 months later and it was for $500, they'd be instantly re-engaged. So that part was actually, I don't want to say it's easier, but was solvable just by attracting a handful of friends and other kind of early adopters and just letting them kind of hang out. But then how do you get the demand, the travelers? You know, especially when you're just starting, no one knows who you are and no one understands the concept. So it's actually really difficult. It doesn't happen by itself. And so, you know, one of the tricks we employed was to create a tool by which suppliers, these hosts, could repost their profile into Craigslist. Because back then, particularly, Craigslist was a very popular place for finding all sorts of things. And so, you know, some travelers, particularly budget travelers, were kind of going in there and looking for alternative arrangements. And so, you know, sometimes you have to go fishing where the fish are. And so, you know, this whole concept, though, more broadly is known as kind of growth hacking. You know, how do you bootstrap something new as a young company? And that was one of the techniques we used by creating this tool by which people could repost into Craigslist. So that was the motivation.
You have no idea how many Vietnamese Facebook group that I am a part of. And I'm posting Christina's one trip, the Joy Factory, everywhere. I mean, just, okay, this is really good food, you should look at it. This is a really nice place to stay, you should come and talk to me about it. And that's how we're pushing to get people to see what we're offering. But it's essentially, it's got to be a service that they ultimately want and then book with us. Yes, and now?
I just want to ask a question about the famous cereal.
The famous cereal is a funny story. So, okay. Basically, we launched in August 2008. and we launched in conjunction with the Democratic National Convention. This is the event where Barack Obama received the nomination of his party to be the candidate for president. So, it was a very kind of historic day, and it was well-timed that we launched then because there was a real need for our service. And as a result of that, we got to meet a lot of political reporters. Anyways, now fast forward 2 weeks, and nobody cares that we exist anymore because we're no longer relevant. No one needs us anymore. So we had this amazing launch, but then I like to say the crickets were chirping. And we're thinking to ourselves, how do we reignite that growth? How do we become relevant again? And the only kind of thing that we had was this list of reporters. It's political reporters. So we said, how do we talk to these political reporters and get them to talk about us? So this is another kind of growth hack. This is a really wacky one, though, which is my co-founders, they're both designers, they came up with an idea to create a presidentially themed cereal. At the time, the name of our company wasn't Airbnb. It was actually Air, Bed, and Breakfast. Okay, so they say, we're going to create a breakfast cereal for Air, Bed, and Breakfast themed after the two presidential candidates. So we're going to create Obama-O's and Captain McCain's. And by create, I mean they actually designed cereal boxes, original artwork. They're quite hilarious. They had them printed, 500 boxes of each. We stuffed real cereal into each box, and we mailed the first 100 of each of these to the political reporters. We said, if we email these guys, they'll definitely delete our email. But if they receive this box of cereal, they'll be like so confused, they'll definitely call us and ask us about it, right? Because they were quite cool. So, and this is right before the election. So actually there's a lot of excitement about the election, a lot of people doing wacky stuff. And so that week we were on Good Morning America. We were also on CNN International. And that day we became the #1 political video of the day talking about our cereal and explaining why we made this. Because it's just funny. And the other 400 boxes of each we sold on our website for $40 a box. And that day we sold a $40 box of cereal every 3 minutes because the video was on CNN. And we sold out of the Obama's. We never sold out of the Captain McCain's. So we could have predicted the election, I guess. But over the course of that week, we made $30,000 selling cereal. And we like to joke that we financed the company that first year through cereal because no investors had given us money at that point. And our core business had generated, only a couple $1,000. So we actually made more money that year selling cereal than we did our primary business activity. So that's the cereal story. It's kind of funny.
So I actually have a very quick question for the audience. How many of you guys here are founders or have started a business? Just a quick raise of hand. Yeah, so I'm one as well. And I think you can relate to this a lot. The challenges never end, right? It's just one thing after another. So you already kind of started talking about it, but could you, because you've gone through from being very small, very hard to get any funding at the beginning to growing it into a unicorn, a $30 billion company today. Perhaps you can share a couple of challenges that you think were really hard to overcome when you were smaller, and what are the challenges that you are dealing with now and when you're much bigger?
Yeah, I mean, there are a ton. I'll start with kind of the very beginning. There's 3 in the first year that I think apply to everybody. First challenge is how do you choose your team? It's probably it's the first decision you make probably, and it's probably the most important in some ways because it's hard to change the team later on, especially if something becomes successful. So this is kind of like a professional marriage. And for me, I mentioned this earlier, the way that the 3 of us got comfortable together is we knew each other. We were friends. We were roommates. But we saw common work ethic. We saw complementary skills. And that was the basis of our partnership. So that's probably the most important thing to think about in the early days before you start. Once you start, there's going to be a lot of people who think you're crazy. Literally, I can't think of anyone. Well, there's only one person in the first year that thought Airbnb was a good idea. Everybody else said, this is not something I would use. Like the investors, at least. We go to investors and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? And they say, well, I don't think I can see myself using it. And I can't imagine it's a very big market. It's probably a small market. And, someone's probably going to get hurt. So, no thank you. No one would even give us a second meeting. And so, it's very discouraging. I mean, literally, we'd go to some people that, we looked up to as like role models, and they said things like, I hope that's not the only thing you're working on. So, you have to face a lot of discouragement, I think, as an entrepreneur, especially in the early days, a lot of self-doubt. But there's one thing that kept us going, which was we had experienced firsthand the value proposition. We had solved our own problem. We saw how magical that was. That one weekend when Joe and Brian hosted the folks from out of town, we felt the magic. And so just because everyone else didn't see it, they hadn't been there with us. If they had seen it, we thought they would have felt differently. So, I think it's really important to make sure you solve a problem that you really understand so that you remain committed to it. Not just something that seems like an opportunity, but something that you deeply connect with and you won't lose confidence in. Then at the end of the first year, nothing had really gone well, to be frank. And we were at the point of, okay, 1 year has gone by. We had no jobs for 1 year. We've been paying rent in San Francisco, very expensive. We were literally in credit card debt because we paid for stuff off credit cards and we didn't have the money to pay the bills. And no investors were willing to give us money. And we say, well, it's been a whole year. Is it time to quit? And this is a tough conversation. What we agreed was that before we can quit, we have to give it 100%, meaning that, yes, we have been working really hard, but the truth is we had distractions in our lives. So, for example, I went back to Boston during this period. They were in San Francisco because my girlfriend, I've been doing long distance for 3 years. She's now my wife, but I had to go back there to figure things out with her. And so we weren't together, meaning my founders and we weren't in the same physical space, so there was that distraction a little bit. We each had some side projects going on. So we're working very hard, but we're also doing a bunch of things. And that doesn't work very well. It really, to be successful, requires like almost a maniacal focus to kind of get off the ground. And so we made a commitment to each other, which is, okay, let's give it 110% of our focus for just 3 more months. After which, if we're not in a materially better place, we'll quit and we'll feel good about it. But let's first give it this one final chance. And it was during that period that we went through Y Combinator, which is kind of a accelerator-like program where they give you $20,000. And more importantly, though, they give you a little structure. They give you a deadline. There's that peer pressure. And that's when things really started to take off for us. So, the other thing I'd just say is like the amount of commitment it requires is huge. And it doesn't, even in our success story, we almost quit. And so, one piece of advice is just to make sure that you have the mindset that this is going to take a while, that you have to persevere. And when you're talking about it with your co-founders and choosing your co-founders, making sure that you're all the same mindset, that even if it doesn't work after a year, that you're going to keep pushing ahead, because we almost quit. So those are 3.
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of startup talks about is pivoting. When you're trying something and you should pivot. If it doesn't work, you should build the MVP and test it out. But for me, when I started this journey, I was trying to figure out what my purpose was. And I said, how the hell do I pivot my purpose? So I kind of, along with what Nath is saying in terms of perseverance and that commitment, we can't emphasize it enough, especially for anyone who's in the startup community. You just gotta grind it out, because if you don't quit, you can't fail. Just keep going, right? So that's something that I think is really important.
And just a fun story related to that. So when we got accepted to Y Combinator, it's a very competitive program. And so you have to get invited for an interview, and your interview is 5 minutes. They make a very quick decision. So you have to go in there and pitch really quick. So we go in, and 2 minutes into the pitch, Paul Graham, who's the founder of this program, he says, "What? People do this?" He didn't get it. And then he basically spent the other 3 minutes trying to convince us to do something different. So the interview went really bad. But then as we were walking out, my co-founder, Joe, gave him a box of this cereal. And he said, are you giving me a gift? And we said, no, we made this. And he said, what, you made this? He said, come back in and tell me about that. So we told him about the cereal. And afterwards, he told us that he accepted us into the program not because of our idea, but because of the cereal story. Because to him, it proved that we wouldn't quit, that we were really scrappy guys that would do whatever it took to succeed. In that year in particular, it was just the beginning of the recession. So he was looking for what he called cockroaches, these guys that just won't give up, that you can't kill. And he has this other saying that I like. He said, startups die of suicide, not homicide. You know, it's not that your competitor comes and kills you as a startup. It's that you give up before you're successful. So.
All right. I think we also have some students here in the audience. Could you just kind of raise your hand if you're still in school? Okay. The reason why I'm asking is when I was in high school, I heard this thing. I said, somebody, I think maybe Hin, one of our common friends, said that Nate bought like, I don't know, a number of Macintosh, like computers. I don't know if this is true. I've never had it proven. I never checked up on it. But I was like, a number of computers for what? So apparently Nate has been an entrepreneur since he was in high school. So for the students that are here studying computer science, can you share some of your experience, some of your tips, the decision-making process that you had even when you were in high school that kind of led you to this entrepreneurial path that you have today?
I mean, it was very organic. I shared a little bit of the story earlier about how it kind of came to be. But I think that the amazing thing I'll just want to like underscore and highlight is that with technology, you know, everything's virtual and everything's basically become free. So like the cost for experimentation is so low. It's just really your cost of living, your opportunity cost. And so, you know, as a young person, I just felt incredibly empowered that I could just build all this stuff. I didn't start with any money, but, you know, I had time and I had curiosity. And with those two things, you know, I began to learn and ultimately create a business that had customers around the world, being run out of my basement with a bunch of computers that I bought. You know, the other thing I'll say is, you know, we're talking a lot about success stories, you know. Yes, I had this successful business in high school. I have Airbnb now. But in between, there's a lot of things I've worked on that weren't successful. Things I put a lot of time and energy into, and I was like really disappointed to see it not work. But I learned something in retrospect, which is that all the failures I've had along the way, all the things that didn't work out, where I might have been disappointed, they were all learning experiences. You know, going through putting the effort in, I learned so much in each case. And had it not been for those learnings, I think I wouldn't have been successful at Airbnb. And so, you know, if you think about failure as just setting yourself up for your future success, I think it's a lot easier to persevere and not get discouraged. So I think that's a really important mindset to go into, which is to say, ask yourself always, are you being challenged? Are you learning? If the answer is yes, you can't go wrong as long as you keep persevering. You'll just get better and better. And after 10 years, there's no doubt you'll be world-class at whatever it is you're doing. So that's, I guess, what I'd say, especially to the young people. Because, you know, you do have so much time ahead of yourselves. And you do right now have the space to learn and focus on learning. And I think it can, you know, compound over the years and take you to some amazing places.
All right. Any other questions yet? Okay. Can you share your name and what organization you're with, company you're with?
Hi Nate. I'm a fan of Airbnb, and also I'm watching a lot of video on YouTube about you guys. And I'm a host myself, so I would like to ask a question about Airbnb. And what is your plan do you have any plan for the Vietnamese market, like to improve the gas from within Vietnam,
Get us more traffic.
No, but the gas in travel within Vietnam in general.
Sure, sure. So, part of being here this weekend and today is to kind of learn firsthand. I think certainly there's a compelling growth story. We see it in our numbers, and certainly the industry tourism figures suggest lots of growth. We're seeing a lot of growth in the region. We're seeing a lot of travelers from China coming down to Southeast Asia, Vietnam specifically. So I find that all exciting, and we'll probably invest further in the future. Hochiminh was one of the first cities where we launched experiences, partially as a result of that. A lot of the things we do generalize, though. So, like, most of the product enhancements we make, they apply to all the markets. It's pretty rare that we have to customize the service to a specific country. It's really the same platform in every country of the world. And then, it's the network effect that really fuels the business. So when Tu says he wants more guests and such, that's a result of marketing in countries across the world, and marketing in China, for example, will drive more visitors to Vietnam. So the short answer is yes, although not necessarily specific product changes for the Vietnam market, because it generalizes so well.
Hi, Nate. My name is Nicholas. I'm an entrepreneur in Hochiminh. And so in 2011, how did you get in front of Sequoia? And how did you get that attention? How did you get funded by them? And what was your traction then?
So what he's referring to is at the start of 2009, we enter Y Combinator. And as I said, we agreed to 3 months. And if in 3 months we're not in a better place, we're going to quit. And so we're very focused, and over the course of the 3 months, every week there was a guest speaker who came to Y Combinator, and one of them was this guy, Greg McAdoo from Sequoia Capital, and he gave a speech, and we got to meet him afterwards and speak with him and pitch him the idea, and we pitched it, and after explaining it, he said, "Let me get this straight." And he basically pitched it back to us, like, much better. We just weren't telling our story very well. And it turns out he had been researching the vacation rental market. And so he was much more familiar with the opportunity. And he saw what we were doing as a unique way of addressing the vacation rental industry. So he saw something that others didn't, because he had been thinking about it for so long, the space in general. And so I guess we were very fortunate. Because talking to Sequoia, which is one of the number one firm in the world for VC investment, so soon after basically having a conversation about is it time to quit, because all investors thought we were crazy, was pretty remarkable. Now, we also had some growth to illustrate at that point. So we started a Y Combinator making $200 a week. And we had been making $200 a week for the last 4 months. And so it was flat growth and a small number. Very bad. And by the end of 13 weeks, we were at about $4,500 a week. So we had actually had really nice growth, going up every single week. So we had this chart that was up and to the right. So they really came in just at the beginning of this whole thing. And they were able to invest $600,000 for 20% of the company. So, that's worth, I don't know, about 4 or 5 billion now from 600,000. So it might turn out being one of the best investments of all time when it finally is liquid.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Ling from Sando e-commerce marketplace. I have a question. So Airbnb has been growing so fast. How do you share your passion with the employees, and how do you build the culture within the company? Thank you.
So one of the most fundamental things is we've always been really clear about our values. So one of the first things we did when we raised money and before we hired anybody was we wrote down a list of what we called values, basically behaviors that we thought defined the team we wanted to create. And we've evolved that list a little bit, but basically since the beginning of the company, before we hired anybody, every single person we brought on, we basically interviewed against this list of criteria. And so what that has done is made sure that only people who are really passionate about what we do have been able to join, who've been able to get through the interview process. And then it's become a common language for talking about what does success look like, what does good performance look like, because sometimes you'll have people who they move the metrics, but maybe how they do it isn't the right way in terms of how they treat their colleagues, how they treat the customer. And so by having a framework for talking about how we achieve success allows us to basically uphold the values over time. So that's one thing. The other thing is certainly making sure that as you scale, you continue to empathize with the customer. So when it's just 3 people or a very small team, it's very easy for everybody to go and meet the customers. But when you have 3,000 people, it's kind of hard to arrange that all the time. And so, we're making sure that our employees, we give them travel credit. So every quarter they're getting free money basically to go out and travel using the service. We encourage many of them to be hosts. We do host meetups where we arrange for them to meet that. We do a lot of research. So we really try to make sure that the connection between the customer and the employees remains strong, even at scale, although it certainly gets harder over time. The other thing I'll just say is, like, if you ever come to our office, one of our offices, you'll see, the spaces are generally very open, very collaborative. And we try to remind everyone through the design of the space, what business we're in. So many of our conference rooms are themed after actual properties on the website. It's very collaborative. We have on the walls lots of work, research to remind people, what is the problem we're trying to solve? How is it that we impact people's lives? And that's all around you. You just can't avoid not seeing it when you're in the office. So I think that too is a way of keeping people really connected to the user experience, which I think is important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think continuing to feed that sense of purpose, and for us, we're a team of 130 people full-time, and that sense of purpose is what's tying us all together to continue to be able to do all the taking on all the challenges that we face.
I'll say one more thing about that. On a number of occasions, there's been kind of a moment in time where you can make a values-based decision, and that when we've made those decisions, it's really galvanized all the employees, but not just the employees, our entire community. So there's for better or worse, unfortunately for worse, there's been a number of things that have happened very publicly over the last year. Earlier this year there was a proposed travel ban in the United States, which we felt was something that violated our values. We just felt like this is the wrong thing for the world. We're trying to make the world a smaller place by connecting people, and suddenly there's a mentality out there and in dialogue about not allowing that. And so we felt that was wrong, and we've been very vocal about it, including we ran an ad during the Super Bowl, which is the #1 slot all year, this biggest sporting event in America. And we bought a Super Bowl ad where we talked about the importance of being open and welcoming people regardless of race, religion, etc. So we made a big investment into our values. It was something that was very kind of a bold move, and we weren't really sure what was going to happen next after making such a bold move. But I think our employees have told us that they never felt so proud about working for such a company that actually stands up for its values and invests in a big way. And actually, we heard the same thing for so many of our community members who wrote to us and said, we feel really proud to be a part of this community. We feel proud to be a part of this extended company family. And so, I think that's another way in which you can preserve your culture and make your culture real from a practical standpoint. Is when these moments come up, you recognize them, and then you lean into them rather than trying to avoid them or manage them or kind of let them pass.
All right, thank you for sharing that. I do want to get one question in, so that then we can open up. We'll have limited amount of time, but just a few days ago, when I was trying to share with our team in terms of how to do sales or like convince a guest to join an experience, for example, and I used this very short statement or question: what's in it for me? So I know a lot of you guys are here from different kind of businesses. So what I wanted to ask Nate is that, what are some of the collaboration opportunities that Airbnb has generated for the startup community, the business communities, whether it's in San Francisco, in the UK, in Europe, or like potentially here in Southeast Asia? What are some of those opportunities that anyone here who is running a business, is starting a business, can potentially tap into in order to continue to grow their business?
I mean, first off, let me just say how happy I am to be up here and for you to taking your time to come listen. It's just something I do try to do when I visit different parts of the world. And the reason I do it is because I remember when I was just starting out, and I remember that first year. And, it was so powerful to hear from people whom, we thought were successful, people whom, we felt like we learned something from. And, it helped us get through that first year. And so, whenever I can, I really do like to share the stories, and I hope you find them helpful. That's one thing. The second thing is it's been amazing to see people, build on top of our idea. And I think this has taken many different forms. Tu talked a little bit about his company, which is, built on top of the Airbnb idea, but he also takes it in his own direction. And I'm really impressed by some of the new ideas that he's introduced into our basic model to make it thrive here. We're seeing this around the world, where there's been now hundreds of companies started to specifically help host with specific issues or create curated collections of Airbnb properties. So, it's really great to see people building on top of an idea and using that as a foundation. And that's something as a company we're thinking about. What's the right way to interact with that community? It's complicated, but in the meantime, people are off and running, and it's exciting to see. The other thing is that people have taken what we've done with trust, with sharing economy concepts, and now applied it to different verticals. And I think that's been really exciting to see. And the power of the age in which we live in is that there's so many ideas and so much technology, and you as entrepreneurs can stick them together to create all kinds of novel use cases. So I think there's never been more opportunity and more things in your toolbox that are readily accessible at your disposal. And to be in a community like this, where you can learn from each other and hopefully attract a regular assortment of speakers who come through and kind of share their learnings from other places, I hope helps you a lot.
All right. We're running out of time, but I'll take, let's say, 2 more questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it up and have some time for people to network and chat with Nate. Okay, so Gung.
Hi Nate, I used to work for you, so thanks for coming.
I've come to bring you back.
I have
the real reason why I'm here.
My question is, so in 2016, you and the 3 founders make the world stunned by commit to a pledge by Warren Buffett to give more than half of your wealth to charity. can you walk us through like what you guys thinking then, and like did you get an approval stamp from your wife? Is it hard? I'm not asking you to give some of that money to Vietnam. I'm sure the people will appreciate it. But the other question is like, what would you say to like there's a lot of other like wealthy people in Vietnam, and like how would you say to them to like have more people like to do the same thing and to pledge their wealth when they made it successfully to give it back to the people? I'm sure like one of Tru's employee was like that. So yeah, that's the question.
So what he's referring to is this thing called the Giving Pledge, which myself and also Joe and Brian, all three of us have signed. And it's something that was started by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. And it's basically a pledge saying that we pledge to give away at least half of our wealth over the span of our lifetime. And there's about, it specifically targets billionaires, and there's about 200 or so who have signed it now. So it's something that's gained a lot of momentum, and I think it's a really great to see that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett created something that has inspired so many to create that commitment. For me personally, it was frankly almost a no-brainer, which is to say, I find myself in an incredibly fortunate place that I never expected to be. And what excites me and why I started the company, but what continues to excite me is doing things that positively impact other people. And so when I think about me in my fortunate position and what do I want to do with this now, this resource, it's, well, I want to help as many people as possible. And so I don't know exactly what that means or how I'm going to do that. I feel it as a very big responsibility to figure that out. It'll probably take some time to make sure it's done wisely. I don't want to waste it. I want to make sure it's used as efficiently and as productively as possible. But it was kind of obvious to me that it should be deployed to benefit as many people as possible. It's not something that I have any use for at that magnitude. So that was the thought process, and similar for my wife. Yeah. Thank you.
I can vouch for that because Nate turned down a Mercedes to ride on the back of my Honda Cup. So, he's not going to need that $1 billion or a few $1 billion.
I believe in the local experience. So.
All right. One last question. I don't know. You guys pick. I'm not picking this one.
Hey, Nate. Eddie Tai from 500 Startups, and a long time ago, Lowell House, 2007.
Hey, Eddie.
Cool.
We're wanted some advice for Vietnamese founders here. So Vietnam is one of several countries where the government takes a very, proactive role in stewarding the economy. It can be challenging for certain kinds of startups like Airbnb or Uber, not just in Vietnam, but in many other countries, to kind of navigate the regulatory environment, right? So Airbnb seems to be doing a pretty good job of that, I think, even though hotels and so on is regulated, even in New York City and so on, whereas Uber has had a little bit more trouble, it seems, at least as an outside perspective. I'm curious whether you have tips from Airbnb's experience for how founders can engage positively with different regulators and governments around the world. What were some of the things that have worked for you that have done better than other companies, for example?
I think the first thing is just a mindset, which is, we all live in a world inhabited by other people. And so, there are a lot of stakeholders out there, and you need to respect that. Just because your idea might be better in your mind doesn't mean you can disregard the other stakeholders. And so I think we've always had this perspective that, to build a long-term business, you have to have good relationships with all the stakeholders. Whether that's governments or other members of industry. And so then the question becomes how. And I think it starts with good communication, to show up in person and have a dialogue, explain who it is you are, why it is you do what you do, and why you think it's a good thing for that stakeholder. And so we've tried to do that around the world, just be as proactive as possible in having conversations, and then realizing that whatever the outcome is, it's probably going to be a compromise. meaning it can't all be my way. Hopefully it's not all their way either. You know, hopefully we reach somewhere in the middle, and that's a good outcome when it is. That's a fair outcome, is when neither party gets what they want exactly, but they get, you know, part of what each wants. And so that's kind of our mentality, which I think is a contrast to how others have approached the market in the past. And you know, some examples of that now is, like, very early on we were clear that we want to pay the same taxes that hotels pay. I mean, when you think about it, actually, an individual has a very different tax structure than a hotel. And so it's by definition going to be apples to oranges. But we said, hey, let's forget, you know, the nuance of that and just say, you know, whatever it is hotels pay, we're willing to pay the same thing too. So we made that kind of open statement to any government in the world. Let's get that straight. And since doing that, we've been able to partner with, at this point, well over 200 governments. Last time I checked, a few months ago, we had collected $250 million in taxes that otherwise, frankly, I think governments weren't in a good position to get access to. They weren't really set up to collect those on their own. We made it really easy. We said, hey, we have this platform that takes activity that otherwise would be happening kind of in the dark, in the shadows. It brings it online, legitimize it, and as part of this platform, we'll make it super easy to take the appropriate tax, and we'll give you a check every month. And you don't have to worry about it. It's going to be exactly the right amount every month. You don't have to go knocking on the doors or calling people up. And so, you know, I think it's a remarkable win-win. But it started with a mindset that, you know, rather than trying to negotiate with everyone and try to get what's best for us, which would be like, okay, you know, maybe we don't need to pay that. It's just like, let's just agree right now up front that, you know, we think this is fair. We put this on the table. And now please work with us to make it a reality, because the reality is we can't collect the taxes unless the government gives us permission to collect the taxes. And so, you know, that's where the partnership also comes into play. So that's a tangible example of how we approach government.
Okay, so I kind of lied. I reserved the last question for myself.
Sneaky.
So you've been here. You came in on Saturday morning. I was still cleaning in the yard, but you were tired, but very willing to follow through the whole itinerary that we set for you for the last couple of days in Hochiminh City. Compared to your experiences of having traveled to other countries or the city, just what is the most unique thing about Vietnam that you've experienced that you haven't seen at other places that you've been to?
I've been to a lot of places. What I'll say about you know, this part of the world is that things are changing so quickly, and you know, I think it makes it really interesting. And I feel that you can feel that when you are out and about on the ground. And so, you know, I really love coming out to this part of the world. It was part of the reason. You know, Tu told me a lot of things about Vietnam. You know, he's just telling me about, you know, how excited he is to have come back here and be building a business and his hopes for the country. And so, you know, that's what brought me out here, to see that for myself. And I certainly felt like I felt that in the people that I've met by being here today and seeing, you know, everyone show up. You know, I feel that too. You know, we got to explore a little bit together. You were nice enough to put together an itinerary. We went to the tunnels, but the Gucci tunnels. But you know, on the way, we rode on motorbikes and made lots of stops. You know, and I just
there you go.
Oh, wow, I got a picture. Cool. You know, there's just so much here, and I think there's so much waiting to be discovered. I see that. You know, I think, you know, there's other countries that have gotten a lot of attention in recent years, but I leave my couple days here feeling like there's a lot right on the cusp of happening here. I know it's already happening, but I think, you know, the next 5-10 years are going to be remarkable. You know, I go to China a lot too, and what I tell people about China back in the States is like, you know, you can't even fathom how fast things move in some of these countries with the amount of change that's occurring. But that's not unique just to China. You know, I think it's of all these countries that you know, have large populations that are hungry, that are now empowered in this digital age, this age of globalization. You know, and I think it's going to be really interesting times. So those are my impressions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nathan, for trusting.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're gonna wrap it up. Nathan, when he came out here, I told him, I don't know if I should treat you as a friend, a classmate. I don't know how to treat a classmate, or as a business trip. But Nate has been out here hanging out with me, and he's been a friend and been a great business partner in supporting what we're doing. Nate is certainly the impact that Airbnb has had in Vietnam, although nothing that we can go out and have some metrics reporting after it, but I think it's tremendous already. Just looking at how the tourism industry is developing, the host community that's getting excited, our team just completely passionate about the work that we do. I can't thank you enough. So thank you so much for coming out here and really energizing the community. So we have a little thing here for Nate.
Okay. On behalf of the university, thank you very much for coming and sharing your story, experience to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.